and thank you for coming to Tech Trends for 2024 and beyond. And with that, I want to introduce my co-panelists for the evening, Nancy Giordano, the founder and CEO of PlayBig Inc., Brian Jacob, the co-founder and CTO of Data.World, and online, Jay Williams, the founder and CTO of Architar. Give them all a round of applause, please. So Jay Williams is online. He's usually in the room here with me, and he and I have been doing this event in person for years and bringing up different guest speakers each year. He couldn't make it this year. He has moved to Buena Vista, Colorado, and he makes regular trips back to Austin, but he couldn't make this one work in his schedule. So the role he's going to play tonight is he's going to reply to various questions that you ask in Slack. But don't worry, that doesn't change your ability to win, because our online question picker is going to still pick her favorite questions to ask. Jay's going to give you a point of view on some of them. Then when that person asks questions, we'll give you points of view on some of them as well. And we may do some follow-up answers during the week as well on that. So still do please go with questions. So I have a few opening comments before we start with our predictions. And just as last year, I posed this question: is this just a fun event, or is this important? And my answer to this starts with, what do humans always do? We try to figure out what's going on, what's going to happen next, and how can I turn it to my advantage? And that might be in your company or organization. It might be in your social life. It might be just figuring out what you want to do for entertainment tonight. It might be how you get a better job, or a different house, or move to a different city. But we're always trying to understand the present and future so that we can make the present better for us, and that we can change our future outcomes for us. That has been true since we saw the other tribe across the river and wanted to know if they were going to attack us. When we saw those dark, ominous-looking clouds moving in and wondering if it was going to have lightning and potentially be a threat to our own tribe, et cetera. This is a standard human thing to want to know what's going to happen next. So my answer about tech trends last year really boiled down to 3 basic points. Technology is expanding exponentially, and you're experiencing time linearly. That means your knowledge gaps could potentially grow every single day, and they are in many areas. But if we have ways to understand what's coming, and we listen to experts and read things and study and do research and also share what we've learned, we can all help elevate each other. In fact, not one of you invented the wheel to get here today, and not one of you has to invent fire to stay warm tonight, because we build on these technologies. But it's moving so fast now that it becomes important to, within a lifetime, to within a decade, to within a year, and sometimes to just within months, to understand what is coming and how it's going to shape our futures, and thus how we can have the best future outcomes. So I can't really put it any more simply than this. We want to understand technology to make ourselves more competitive, more innovative, et cetera. And we also want to understand these technology trends in time to change major societal and planetary issues like climate change. So I would argue it is fun, but it's critical that we understand the speed of innovation, the areas it's occurring, and how we can bring these things to benefit in our own lives and our own companies, and for our society and our planet as well as possible. Well, this year I decided, well, why don't we ask ChatGPT the answer? You can ignore the I forgot to tell it to be concise. I should have said in 3 bullet points, tell me if tech trends are important, but I did. I asked it, are they important? And it said, yes, tracking technology trends is important for various reasons. Here are some key points to consider. I highlighted the key functions in yellow, since there's no time for you to read all of these slides, but you can see innovation and competitiveness, strategic planning. In fact, most companies have a CTO and a chief strategy officer, et cetera. In fact, we have a strategist and a CTO on stage right now. So this is a common thing for companies to want to understand what technologies are coming next. Adaptability, risk management, cost savings, unless you think ChatGPT was concise. Here are the other 5. So customer expectations, talent acquisition, global impact, opportunity identification, and societal impact. I actually had all those points embedded in my 3. So for once, I was the concise person in the room. So at least with ChatGPT. So some caveats. We only have an hour. We're not going to do deep dives into any of these technologies, but we will deep dive into them in our programming through the rest of the year. So we hope you'll come to events and listen to the podcast and read the books and participate in the book discussions, even if you don't read the books, because you'll still get a lot out from the book discussion. So we are going to provide our understanding of these technologies, some of which we're expert in, some of which we're only semi-expert in, but we'll give you high-level views. We can't cover every emerging technology, but we're going to cover several here tonight. Also, you really shouldn't use anything we say here as stock market advice tomorrow. You might factor it into your decisions, but we're not telling you what stocks to buy here. We're not telling you who to vote for. We're not telling you any of these other things. The caveat to that, of course, is that we're all going to drink whiskey together after this, so who knows what we'll say at the networking part after this, so you can ask us then. First, some major achievements of 2023. This is just several that I selected that I wanted to remind everybody. Every year we have a tremendous number of important achievements in technology. This is a tiny, tiny fraction, but it was some that I think are particularly important either this year or for what they mean for next year. Two of them are straight up enterprise things. Multi-cloud usage, about 42% of customers by some surveys are now using multi-cloud in their enterprise instead of a bunch of single isolated independent clouds. You're all using cloud computing, right? I think the only app on your smartphones that is not connected to a cloud is probably the calculator. Even your camera is probably uploading your photos to a cloud somewhere. So you're all using all these different clouds, but in enterprise, it's important to leverage all these resources in the most cost-effective way for the strongest capability. So that was a big one. Zero trust security. We're going to talk about cybersecurity a lot this year, but this new relatively new zero trust approach really gained a lot of momentum. Quantum computing, you probably heard a lot about it this past year, and we covered it 3 months ago with Worley in an event here in this room. A lot of achievements where it is not enterprise ready yet, but it absolutely showed that it is real, that there is potential, that in fact we can see the path to doing some problems that we couldn't do any other way. It is coming, and it was a big year for advances in that now everybody accepts that it's real and inevitable. And now the question is when that it's useful for them. The Falcon Super Heavy and Starship didn't have maybe the best results for the entire flight, but the second one didn't blow up the launch pad. And it's the absolute heaviest lifting rocket that's ever been launched, and by a private company, no less. I think this portends very well for the ongoing commercialization of space that I'll talk about later. The first CRISPR-based treatment was approved by the FDA for sickle cell anemia. How many of you saw that in the news? That's great. This is going to change all of your lives, and especially all of your offspring's lives, quite literally over the decade ahead. We've covered CRISPR in here before. It's time to cover it again, and synthetic biology more generally in the Austin Forum in 2024. Amazing progress is being made in that field. And also generative AI explosion. I have a feeling you're about to hear a lot about that in the predictions. And so, oh, how about that? Next slide. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian Jacob for his predictions. Brian? Oh, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Jay. So yeah, I'm Brian Jacob. I'm the CTO, one of the co-founders for a company here in town called Data.World. We do a lot with enterprise data management and AI. So unsurprisingly, that's going to be a theme that I'm going to talk through here. Jay did a better job prompting us than he did ChatGPT. He told us to keep it to 3 things, 2 things for this year, and then 1 kind of forward-looking. So that's the, yeah. Thanks. No, I'm not very good with the microphone. So yeah, so 3 things for each of us, 2 that are predictions for what's going to happen this year. 1 is a little bit more future looking. There's a common theme throughout mine that you'll see here very clearly. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was the notion of generative AI growing up. So we're about 14 months into when OpenAI launched ChatGPT, which really kind of sparked this explosion of generative AI and everyone's awareness. That's the wrong direction. And I think what's been developing over that just a little bit more than a year, and what's going to really kind of come to fruition this year is this technology growing up from something that's a novelty that people are seeing, oh my gosh, this is real, it's effective, it has a lot of capabilities, but to actually being able to use it in real organizational enterprise types of settings. What does that mean? It means it goes from being a novelty to something you actually are going to trust with decisions. There's a fundamental problem with that if you kind of understand how these large language models, this generative AI works, and that it's all a branch of machine learning. It's inherently a statistical model. So you've probably heard the notion of like hallucinations, where sometimes you ask it a question and it comes back with a completely made up answer that seems totally plausible, but has no basis in reality. That's really nothing more than kind of a notion of the fact that these are statistical machines that have read a lot of content, and when you and all they're doing is basically predicting the most likely seeming reasonable answer based on all of the content they've consumed. It's incredibly powerful. It's actually not usable in a lot of cases for making real kind of decisions that have impact, decisions in a corporate setting where there's real kind of financial settings, decisions that are potentially life and death. What is happening is people are figuring out, how do we actually combine this technology with other technologies in order to be able to get to the point where we can actually put governance, put auditability, put explainability on the answers that come back, so that you're not in a position of asking a large language model, asking ChatGPT, what investments should I make in the next quarter, and going off and acting on that information. And one key technology that's not it's not in and of itself a new technology, but is actually going to be its combination with generative AI is the thing that's going to really kind of change the landscape for how generative AI works in real world settings, is the notion of knowledge graphs. Knowledge graphs are basically a way of organizing data, information, knowledge as structured networks of facts, nodes that represent real world things, edges in those graphs that represent relationships between things. And the combination of using large language models with knowledge graphs gives you the ability to, by the way, my pictures are all just illustrations of points. There's going to be very few words. All of these were generated by ChatGPT and DALL-E. So these were this, a fun illustration of what you can do with this. But using yeah, I don't remember. I spent a little bit of time just kind of tweaking till I got something that I liked that felt like illustrated the point. But the combination of large language models with knowledge graphs gets us to the point where you can actually ask these systems questions, get back answers that you can go check, that you can audit, that you can apply governance to, that you can actually understand. This is incredibly important in enterprise settings, in settings where there are real world stakes. And the words that you're going to start seeing the notion of, I'm using the word complex multi-state agents here. You're probably going to see the words more intelligent agents, autonomous agents. But the idea that we're going beyond just a large language model where you're asking it a question and you're getting back the statistical answer, to agents that have that same interaction model. They act as though they're an entity that you can converse with. You can ask it a question and get back an answer. But what's going on is more than just a large language model, more than just the generative AI component. It's a component, but it's only a piece of the puzzle. It's used for understanding the nuance and the understanding behind what a human's asking in natural language, and for helping to formulate an answer back. But it's working in conjunction with these other technologies. So I think this is going to be a trend, and why this is important kind of across the board for the advancement of generative AI is that as it becomes real, these become trustable systems that the enterprise can actually employ, that's where all the investment comes in. That's what's going to inject massive additional investment into this technology when companies can use it for more purposes. All right. Number 2, AI is going to get more conversational. This might not seem that novel, right? The whole breakout thing for generative AI was ChatGPT, was this chat-based interface. How many people here actually spend time interacting with ChatGPT, other generative AI tools? Great, most everyone. Awesome. So you've interacted with these tools. I think the thing that the thing that I think we're going to see happening over the next year is that we're going to the personification of these tools is going to increase dramatically. You're going to stop thinking of these things quite so much as a tool. The notion of prompt engineering is really important, really powerful, but a lot of work's gone in the last year toward how do I engineer my prompts to one shot to go against this large language model, get back a really great answer with the minimum number of round tripping. All that's super important, and yet I think we're actually going to start to see tools drifting more away from that to actually meet more people where they are, and the tools are going to be increasingly better at having iterative context that's drawn out through a conversation. I asked it to illustrate basically, I kind of described me and minus 30 pounds. I think it's pretty decent. Walking and having a conversation with an AI agent. What I want to illustrate here is like, this is the thing I do right now today. One practice that I have, and you can do this right now today. If you have the Chat GPT, this won't work with the website. You have to actually install the Android or iPhone client. But that little button there, that little headphone button, basically throws Chat GPT into its conversation mode. It's the same underlying model. It's the same basic tech. You can go back to your desk and interact textually with it, but you can set that up, put in a pair of earbuds, go for a walk, which I do, almost daily. Go spend an hour, 90 minutes. I'll queue up a bunch of things that I want to work on. For example, help me draft a speech for the Austin Forum that I'm going to go talk at, or help me write this blog post, or help me plan this project. And it's just an interface on top of the existing ChatGPT model that you've typed with, but it changes fundamentally kind of how you interact with the technology. It's a lot more iterative. It's a lot more, help me do this. That wasn't quite right. Help me do this better. The interface, when you turn that on, is subtly different than the actual text-based back and forth. That model, that agent, that intelligent agent that is actually doing different sets of things. It has different activities. It has different notions of like how you can interrupt it, if that makes sense. And that as a tech, I think this is a trend that's going to continue, because this makes it much easier for, non-technologists. I'm very comfortable with prompt engineering. All the engineers on my team are very comfortable with the ocean of like, let's go learn the coolest new techniques for prompt engineering to squeeze the most efficiency out of these large language models. It's very cool for people who are already good at writing software. This is what's going to make it so that a much broader set of people can actually interact and as more people touch this technology, the technology is going to get more conversational. One thing I think is, I start thinking about when I think about this is one of the interesting philosophical questions around generative AI, large language models, is as these things get better, more intelligent, better trained, more sophisticated, we throw more billions of parameters at them, all these things, can they ever be conscious, sentient, like people? Doesn't matter what you think about that. Like there's huge diversity of opinion about whether that's actually where this goes or not. There's just, the notion of artificial general intelligence. Is this kind of the sort of thing? What's definitely going to happen, in my prediction, is whether or not they can actually be conscious, we're going to interact with these things more and more as though they are. We're going to start treating them. Human beings will form relationships with these things. You will start to actually have human-like empathy and the conversations. It's going to be a different, I talked about the notion of explainability giving you trust in that corporate setting. The way we interact with these things is going to build a different kind of trust relationship, because people are going to talk to you're going to start thinking about the AI more as a collaborator, less as a tool, more as, something that you're having a conversation with, that's helping you with your work. It's your coworker. It's a collaborator in your process. Doesn't matter what you believe philosophically about what's really going on. That you're going to start. I believe this firmly because I already see it myself. Like I interact with ChatGPT differently when I'm using it as an assistant. I'm having these conversations, and I'm getting better at having the right conversation with it. And the more I get better at getting efficiency out of it, the more I really feel like I'm actually just talking to it the way I would talk to a person. I'm actually kind of building up the way that I speak to it. And then I'm going to go. So my third topic feels like it's a little bit out of left field, but it's actually kind of direct through line of this. So we're talking about what's the future prediction, building right off of everything we're talking about with generative AI. Blockchain is a thing that I think maybe not going to quite break out this year. It's really hard to predict, but over the next couple of years, we're going to see the massive kind of exponential hockey stick that people who have been aficionados of blockchain and and cryptocurrency, all the things around it, have been predicting for years. You're going to see that happen over the next couple of years. And the reason you're going to see that happen is directly because of the advances in generative AI, the advances in agents. Because what is blockchain fundamentally? Jay mentioned zero trust security. It's basically a ledger that everyone can agree is an efficient way to exchange information in a way that everyone can check the veracity of that, and you can't cheat the system. It's a zero trust system. I don't have to trust you at all in order to engage in contractual relations if I have blockchain. One reason blockchain hasn't maybe taken off the way that some folks have predicted quite yet is because zero trust actually hasn't been the biggest problem for folks to solve. We have currency that works pretty well in the world. We have the ability, we have already delegated a lot of trust to corporations, and we're willing to do that in a lot of sense. Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. That's going to change partially because we're going to suddenly have an influx of first thousands, then millions, then potentially billions of new actors, new agents that can actually take autonomous action. And in that world where you're not just having to worry about transacting with me, you're having to worry about transacting with me and 10,000 autonomous agents that I can actually send to do my bidding. You're going to start having the notion of, what can you encode on blockchain? People are very familiar with things like cryptocurrency, right? It's a currency that exists in these blockchains. Currency is just a very simple contract, right? Currency is just a simple, I have proven that I have this dollar. And so if I give you this dollar, you can give me something that's worth $1 in exchange. You can do much more sophisticated contracts. That technology already exists. Like, this is just what blockchain already is. It's already good at modeling these smart contracts. Those contracts, when you start coupling it with autonomous agents that can take action, are going to start to become autonomous. Where this kind of starts to move toward is you start to get the notion of autonomous corporations, autonomous legal entities. You're going to start, I talked about, whether you believe philosophically that we're going to get artificial general intelligence out of generative AI or not, we're going to start personifying these things increasingly. We're going to interact with them as though they are people. We're also going to start ascribing these agents legal status. We're going to start ascribing them some kind of legal status, some kind of legal personhood, some kind of economic status. And in order for all of that to work, this is where that fundamental technology of blockchain is really going to become just absolutely mission critical. It's going to move from something that, has a lot of, there's a lot of great benefits from it today. It's not like this technology is brand new. We're going to see it become actually something that's really a part of everyone's mainstream life over the next couple of years. And I think that's going to be driven by the increase of autonomous agents. And I think that's my last slide. It is.
I'm going to steal your extra. I think you gave me an extra minute and 22 seconds, and I'm taking them, baby. First of all, thank you again for all of you for being here. It's really fun to see people I haven't seen in a year or two. So hi, guys. And there are amazing people in the room. So I do hope you stay for networking, and I can introduce you to cool Chip, and I can Whitney and Anastasia and Victoria and some amazing people who are driving a lot of fascinating conversations in the city and doing a lot of leadership work. So thank you for pulling us all together as usual. This is, we have very different styles. So yes, 2024, big year, right? A lot of things are going to happen. I'm going your way. Here's what I think is really interesting. There's a book that was written several years ago, but I think if you haven't, if this all feels somewhat new, The Future's Faster Than You Think was a great book written by Peter Diamandis and Stephen Kotler. But when I talked to him a couple of years ago and I asked him really what this means, back to Jay's point, their point was that we're sitting on 14 internet-sized transformations. You can just take a deep breath for a moment and just try to imagine what that means. We see a bit of that when we talk about generative AI and just how transformative that has been, and some of the things that maybe blockchain, I'll say there's advances post-blockchain that are will serve more community needs than necessarily corporate needs, but there's this whole way in which we'll think about the distributed web. These are all big, huge things that are happening, and we are giving you tastes of it today. So I will start with phygital convergence. So phygital is this weird word that it's taken me a while to finally embrace. And this is an eye chart too, but this is quickly, there's a whole bunch of technologies that are advancing on the left. And there's, every single aspect of our life that is changing as a result of those things. So it's really the convergence of the digital in the physical in our daily life. In 2014, a guy named David Rose, who was part of the MIT Media Lab, wrote a book called Enchanted Objects, which I thought was just a great name. And one of the examples he gave is a smart umbrella. So imagine you're leaving your house one day and it already knows that the weather is going to change, and the umbrella glows in some way to let you know that you should take your umbrella. Like that became like one of the phygital things, right? Digital impacts your physical life. He wrote another book in 2021 called Supersight that has all kinds of interactive pieces to it. I encourage you to take a look at both of those. But here's what it starts to look like. This doesn't exist yet. This is what the envision was, right? They will have any kind of object that will be have a data layer on it. So whether or not you pick up, it won't be a credit card at that point. I don't think it'll be a piece of plastic. But you could walk into this room if you have a device and understand what the history of the building is, or whether or not the air quality is any good, or whether or not it was built in a LEED certified way, or whatever it is that you would want to know about a building. Like, so we'll have different pieces in which we will all be able to be, you know, a package smart, a building smart, anything in our world smart. It'll start to look like that. We aren't there yet, as far as I know. The part of it is that we're redesigning platforms. So sorry, this looks a little wonky, but how we will interact, right? This becomes part of it. I'll just remind you guys that in Japan, they're already talking to little waifu characters. It sits inside a thing called Gatebox. If you guys haven't checked it out, it's been around for years. Someone has now programmed it with ChatGPT so you can have more robust conversations. But she basically does what the umbrella does and reminds you about your day, checks in on you, wakes you up, but it's all done through this waifu. And I could not find a picture of something that doesn't look like a 13-year-old girl. So perhaps there's some opportunity to improve what the waifu looks like moving forward. Then we talk about the Vision Pro. You know, Apple would come out with its device. Oh, this is in the wrong order. So let me just flip them all out at the same time. But you've got whether or not we will have a smart contact lens. This came out at CES a couple of years ago, continues to advance. I really do believe we'll have a smart contact lens. I think that, you know, the humane pin will be interesting to see how it interacts with us. It's a generation of smart glasses. And yes, we talk about implantables, but it's not just in your brain. We've already now just came out January 3rd, the tracking of a glucose monitoring device will be inserted in our bodies. And this is not just for people who have diabetes. This is for people who are now trying to figure out how to optimize nutrition and figure out exactly what they should eat and when they should eat it and what it does to their blood levels. So these are the ways in which we'll start to interact with these technologies. So back to autonomous agents. Here's what you can do. There's a now dating app called Snack that lets your AI avatar date somebody else's AR avatar. Why? And their line is busy. AI has got your back. So while y'all are here, your AI is on some date somewhere, and we'll fill you in when we're done about how that went. We can file your taxes via gamification. So this was something that came out, I think, again, another year or two ago, in which you play a game, you pretend like you're dating. It's very, again, male-centric. So it's like you're dating, you have to say when you want to woo this woman, and you've decided whether or not you're, you know, what your income levels are and what your dependents are. And they warn you that this is actually going to the IRS. So like, don't lie, don't embellish, like be real. But this is how it starts to shift. Again, we've talked a lot about how you can create income in this, but a few months ago at an event here in Austin, I met the founder of MetaTailor, who's built a platform that allows you to design fashion for your avatar, and it goes across all the various platforms. So a game, a dating device, whatever. If you create this really, really cool jacket, or you buy a designer jacket, or you buy a jacket that, you know, any of us have created, it becomes with you anywhere you want to go. The only thing they can't figure out how to dress right now is an octopus with 8 arms, but they can do any other shape that you want. But again, it goes back to how we will make money in the digital world. I have been begging for this for years. Every time I go on vacation with my family, I am like, how come I can't know? Like, we're at Pompeii. Like, I want to know what the life of Pompeii was like while I'm there. Now, this is an app that Greece just sanctions called Kronos. The country of Greece, in which you can hold it up to the Parthenon and the Acropolis and get real-time information about what it was like back in the day when it was fully functioning. This is going to continue to grow, and it'll be everywhere. You want to look down when I fly and understand what I'm flying over and get all that information. It really bugs me that I can't get there yet, but hopefully soon. And then this is something a friend of mine, Mike Pell, wrote this book that came out this year called Visualizing Business. And the idea is, again, how will we take all this data and make it work for us in more dimensional ways? He describes it as 4D business. The fourth dimension is time. So you can take all this data and now it can be digitized and it can be amplified in all these visual ways, and we can move across time. So when we talk about sales trends, like what they were a year ago or a month ago or into the future, but like you can toggle back and forth and do modeling and predicting in much more dynamic ways. And you can literally do it on your desktop. Like it will sort of pop up there for you at some point. You can imagine working with your team on being able to make that data work. And then when I asked my 23-year-old son what he thought we should bring to this meeting, and he's here tonight, he was like, talk about what's going on with the NFL. So I think what's really, really fascinating is Amazon made a deal with the NFL to be able to stream the games through Amazon and through Twitch, but they also have been doing all this data analysis through their AWS platform since like 2015. They now created a separate channel. You can go through to Prime Vision and get all these crazy stats that you want in real time, which I'm sure is also converging with the online gambling addiction problem that we've got right now. But that's one way you can watch the game. Another way in which they work then with Nickelodeon. And in real time, there was I think it was an exhibition game in London. They played the game in Nickelodeon, in Disney Plus with Toy Story background. And so as, you know, the tackle was happening or as a pass was being thrown, it was being thrown in this game as well, but done with characters that kids could relate to. right? I just think that's fascinating and super, super interesting. We start to imagine the future of the NFL and whether or not we find them too dangerous and scary to be a part of. Maybe not if a toy's playing with it. And then they also, again, interestingly, worked with Amazon during Black Friday this year, and they embedded a bunch of sales stuff in it. So literally, as you're watching the game, you can take your controller and see what it is that Shaq thinks he wants you to buy, and have an engagement there. So I just think, again, it's a lot of experimentation, a lot of playing about how this works with us. Singapore is trying to become a fully digital nation in which everything will be embedded. They are now bragging that 99% of their government services are digital from end to end. Estonia has been doing the same thing. In Estonia, the only thing you couldn't do is get a divorce, because they feel like for that you should really be face to face to have a conversation and make sure that's really what you want to do. Okay, that was
Eventually they'll have your avatars divorce, I bet.
I want you have to show up. That's a really good point. I love it. All right, so all I'm saying is it's like these are zillions examples that we can have. There's digital offices and digital twins. It's in factories. It's wherever. But the idea is that there will be a seamless connection back and forth, and we will no longer have these distinctions of this versus that, digital versus analog. It will all be digital, unless one of y'all comes up with a better word. All right, the second is climate tech. I've been talking a lot about then 2023 was the year that we all woke up to AI. Many of us have been in this field for many years. We predicted what was going to happen with GPT. We didn't expect that to come out and be quite so broadly available, but we saw the advances coming. I will say the same thing now for climate tech. We are there. I think 2024 is the year we're really going to wake up and think a lot about it. It's coming from two places. One is from the government level, right? I got a chance to catch the very beginning of COP28 in Dubai. A couple months ago, 400,000 of me's attended there to be part of the conversations, and they had a groundbreaking, at least signal, as dramatic as people wanted it to be, but to the end of the era of fossil fuels. So you've got a lot of people jumping in, trying to figure out how to be part of that. A lot of conversation was a whole tent about climate financing. But then you also have a young generation that is very outspoken about the fact that this is the need. Sage Lanier, if you don't know her, she's a 24-year-old. She went to UC Berkeley. She's really fanatical about making sure that her generation doesn't feel the sense of doom and eco anxiety and eco trauma. She's really trying to empower people to be part of the solution. She proposed a class at UC Berkeley. At age 19, they've now taught it to 1,800 students. She's a and she spoke at Web Summit. Like, she's in there having big conversations and really holding all of us accountable. She will say she doesn't have enough power yet, but we all do. So do something with it. You start to look at what the market size is. This is from Statistica. It's 25 billion currently. They expect it to ramp up to 182. McKinsey hopes it gets to much in the trillions in order to be able to solve our problem. Just to put that in context, it's 25% more than last year, 50% more than 2 years ago, but still has a long way to go. Exxon's profits for Q4 were 8.9 billion. So, there's makeup work that we need to do to catch up, but we're getting there. Again, McKinsey's report would talk about there's 12 particular technologies that we should be focusing on. They bucket it into these 4. Probably better take a screenshot of this, but the fact is that there are particular areas that people are focusing on. And most interesting to me is that Houston has become a hotspot for clean tech startups, as was reported in oilprice.com, right? That just shows you where the progress is. No, because everyone's realizing that this is where we're going and this is where we're headed. So let's all be part of the solution as opposed to still trying to, fight our way through that. And then to give us all hope, Fast Company put out the 10 climate tech innovations that will give us hope for 2024. Because I was dictated a certain point size on my slides, I was only able to include 7 of the 10. But you just to get a sense of it, right? It's everywhere from what we're doing with jet fuel, a gas utility that is helping a community shift to geothermal heat. People are starting to swap their stoves. I guess this really is real, that we should be changing to induction ones. It's on farms that we're doing it. It is on ships that we're doing it. It is in concrete that there's a lot of innovation that is happening. So it's very exciting to see what's happening. I spoke at an event in Montana and did a dinner with about 25 people. I would say at least a third of the people who stood up and introduced themselves to me told me they were working on climate tech. So we're here. And the last is one that I could not be more excited to share with you. If you don't already know, Dr. Mary Lou Jepson, she is literally a genius. She is worked for every big major tech company and a lot of whatever we would call it, devices. She was the brains behind the one laptop per child. She started her own company a few years ago called Open Water. She was a keynote speaker in Dubai at the Dubai Futures Forum. And she basically shared with us, it got really weird, her picture, but basically she's created a brain scan device. It's like basically like a portable MRI that is very, very cheap and easy for people to be able to use. It doesn't quite have the visual clarity yet of an MRI, but what they found is that it was really brilliant for blood flow. And so they can, she's managing right now and being able to predict stroke in seconds. If you put this on someone's head, you can immediately figure out if they're having a stroke, which is critically important for stroke detection. And because if you do it fast, people heal. She's finding that she's actually also, she can explain it so much better. I really would encourage you guys. Jay has the link, Jay Williams, in the chat. Maybe he can put it in there, of her talk where she describes what she's doing with silicone and what she's doing with being able to direct sound and light directly into your brain and be able to blast out certain brain cancers. Like literally the sound just sort of vibrates and it breaks up. Your body absorbs the proteins, and she's able to help with mental illness and other neurological illnesses in the brain. The most important part about all this, it's all non-invasive. It is not done with a lot of electricity going into your brain. It is very much more affordable and much more accessible. And she's open sourcing it. As of 2 days ago, she just announced that all of it is going open source to create the world's first open source, open patent, open clinical data, open safety sharing company centered on the idea of the Silicon Hospital. So I would say, yay to Mary Lou Jepsen. I'm so grateful for her work and what she is doing. She is truly revolutionizing medicine without having to drill anything into our brains. So, they're mine. That was just to say that we're still early days with all of this stuff, right? And that's what's so exciting is that we get to decide what it looks like moving forward.
All right, so I'm going to start with a little bit of a downer tech trend. Don't worry, I'll end with an up one, but not all tech trends are positive. And this is the one that causes me the most worry, and it's disinformation. And I want to distinguish between two terms here. We see the word misinformation a lot, and technically disinformation is a subset of misinformation, but misinformation happens all the time when you share you remember a number wrong and you share it with somebody wrong, or you make a typo in something, or you share the wrong source or something. So misinformation can be accidental. In fact, in Gen AI, hallucinations are a kind of misinformation. Disinformation has intent that goes with it. There's an intent to deceive. Now, disinformation is not new. It's been called many things throughout history, like propaganda and things like that. But it's a big tech trend now for reasons that we'll talk about. Again, as I said on this slide, we've had misinformation for a long time, ever since two people could communicate and one of them remembered something wrong or embellished something. We've had disinformation for a long time as well. The challenge now is the way technology is exacerbating these things, and they've really exploded since late 2016. And so when you look at this graph, you see a term that cropped up called fake news in late 2016. Now that term is it's the blue line in this graph. It's a little bit on the decline because the appropriate general terms are misinformation and disinformation. And you see that is on the rise as people begin to call this kind of bad information what it is. More and more people are beginning to use that term, but also the problem is growing more acute. And it's growing more acute because of a few things. Technology has always helped us communicate with more people better, cheaper, and faster. But the internet really became a great magnifier for that, right? You didn't have to, it used to be you had to be adjacent to them to communicate. Then you could make a physical product like a book, and the book could be shipped somewhere, and that might communicate with them. But the internet made it possible to communicate with people around the world, people you didn't know, at the speed of light, essentially. And then, in the early days, though, not many people had access to the internet. But then the web and various web platform tools in Web 2.0 enabled people to publish on the web, not just download content from the web, but upload content to the web. And then social media platforms and smartphones, of which over half the world has access to and uses. These made it possible for pretty much anyone to say pretty much anything they wanted at pretty much any time. There are still certain things in countries that are forbidden to say, or culturally forbidden, or legally forbidden, et cetera. But of course, in this country, we value our right to be able to speak our minds. This is a potential challenge, though, because if there's no punishments for disinformation, which is again based on intent, then the opportunity to mislead becomes large. Generative AI is the next magnifier for this capability. We had an event on misinformation and disinformation several months ago in the Austin Forum, and I put a fortunately very funny piece of misinformation on the screen. And I asked all of you that were in attendance that day to submit your own piece of misinformation or disinformation, albeit with non-hurtful intent, which most of you followed that instruction. And the winning nonviolent entry won the South by badge for that event. And we did it with Chat GPT because I wanted everybody to see just how easy it is. Now, fortunately, the companies are taking it upon themselves to put in some guardrails about what you can post in a social media platform or what you can ask Chat GPT to generate. Although people find workarounds through prompt engineering in clever ways to get around those guardrails and still generate misinformation and disinformation. So I'm very worried about this. The societal trends right now are towards more of the people that you communicate with are online and often anonymous to you. This has a polarizing effect. People, we're actually really kind of in a rage economy. All of advertising and online things, they used to say it was mostly about sex sells. Now they're saying that rage sells. And we find people using these online platforms in this rage economy to get attention, to get clicks. Sometimes that translates to money. Sometimes it's just because people want to do it. It feeds their ego, the number of reactions they get. This concerns me, and it's going to be up to all of us to be part of the solution to this. And we, just as with other aspects of generative AI, we don't have enough safeguards in place yet. I'm going to get to that in my third point here today. But in my first point of disinformation, I think you're going to see a lot more of this as more people master generative AI tools, and as we head into a major election year, and in this country and in some other countries around the world. And so I'm just going to ask all of you to be cognizant of what you read online, check sources, verify, validate, and think about ways, especially if you're in the space of a company that's developing tools that might be useful, how you could maybe tweak those tools to help identify misinformation and disinformation. And there are ways to do it. And Brian, in his opening, mentioned making these LLMs integrate with knowledge graphs that are fact-based graphs, so that maybe they'll be more correct. But maybe these tools can be turned to monitoring content created to see if that content actually is correct or if it's been changed in some way to be deceitful. So this is an important one. We're going to come back to it in the Austin Forum programming this year, but it's one of the dark sides of people being able to use generative AI on top of these other platforms that we've developed over the last 10 and 20 years to really create problems. On a more uplifting note, the competitive commercialization of space. So we're all aware of the tremendous success that SpaceX has had, especially since they're launching their vehicles from a few hours south of here in Texas. It really has become a golden age of rocketry, of space flight. We now see hundreds of flights, or over 100 flights each year go up. I think SpaceX alone accounted for over 90 flights this past year. There are thousands of satellites in orbit. This is really a staggering thing, considering especially the fact that space flight is really only several decades old. Right. And now there's over 8,000 satellites in space. Unfortunately, there's a lot more space junk. There's over 8,000 active working satellites. Dr. Moraba Jah from UT Austin, and also Privateer, the space company, he tracks this. He's spoken at the Austin Forum before, and space is actually getting littered with space junk, which is going to be a problem for all of this. But the benefits are tremendous, and I really want to focus on that. We're about to enter an era, and I think 2024 is going to be the uptick when some of the competitors to SpaceX are also going to be more successful. So ULA just launched their Vulcan rocket the other day. They're 4 years late, but it happened, and they've got more launches planned in 2024. Blue Origin has launches planned. Several other commercial companies have launches planned. There are hundreds of total launches planned for 2024, including lots of really interesting missions by NASA and the Japanese Space Agency and the European Space Agency. So we've got a lot of progress in this space, and I think it's not that 2024 is going to be the year that the space industry takes off. That happened. 2024 is going to be the year that it's finally competitive. And that is going to be a further boon to bringing costs down, driving innovation faster when there's no accidental monopoly, and really ushering us further into this golden age of spaceflight.
Can I just jump in and say what an amazing employment opportunity for people who've been sitting there for years wanting this to happen? Can I just be a proud mom for a moment and say my oldest son is a rocket engineer with Firefly, and left Lockheed Martin to be able to join a faster moving startup, no pun intended, and is really excited that he gets to have that opportunity, right? And I met a woman at an event in Montana who's now trying to launch a satellite network around the world using either Firefly or someone else that she thinks will then cover every single corner of the planet. There will be no dark corners because, again, to your point, it's more affordable to be able to go make all that happen now.
Yeah, and that is truly one of the many benefits of this golden age of space flight is that we've blanketed the Earth in communication satellites, right? And they're playing pivotal roles in things like conflicts and such, but more importantly, they're enabling everyone, including in rural areas, to be able to connect and communicate at high bandwidth and be part of the digital era. So this is one that I'm really excited about. And for my third pick, I'm going to talk about the coming wave. And I'm going to use that title of that book that we read recently for the Austin Forum book discussion. It was one of the most eye-opening books that we've read as we've been doing these monthly book discussions. We're all familiar with technological advances. We all sort of have a feeling of exponential improvement, even though we can't really feel it day to day. Things feel kind of static or linear at best day to day, even though when we look back in time, we realize there was exponential progress. But you have major societal challenges when several disruptive technologies combine. Now, almost all of you are holding one in your hands right now. Your smartphone isn't a phone. Well, it can do that, but most of the time people ask you to please not call them, to send them email or text them these days first. Of course, our parents still call us and we take those calls, but your smartphone is really a aggregation point for several disruptive technologies that you now probably take for granted, like high resolution digital photography, like GPS and that satellite system that we just mentioned before, like the ability to call somebody around the world from your portable pocket device, when long ago we had to think of what was our AT&T or MCI plan going to be, and could we even call internationally on it, and divvying up the expenses for these calls with our roommates and things like this. It's really a lot of technologies, a lot of gyrometers and other sensors have come together in that one device, and it's remarkable and game-changing, and yet we all take it for granted and we upgrade again the next year to the iPhone 15 or whatever. We have some major technology changes that are going to come together here very soon. And this book was, I thought, a very good articulation of this. For the first time, we can envision a superintelligence. We can envision that AI is more than parlor tricks. It's more than one-shot, magic tricks like beating every human in the game of Go, which several years ago we thought was impossible. And by the way, this author was part of that DeepMind team that accomplished that. It is now we are realizing that if not now, it is inevitable that we will create AIs that in many ways, not just one, in many comprehensive ways, are vastly more capable than the human brain. At the same time, synthetic biology, which is lagging this AI hype rush just a little bit, but synthetic biology offers the potential to not just cure disease, but make new biological materials, artificial photosynthesis, et cetera, but also to enhance humans and human capabilities. So these two capabilities, making something smarter, that's how we've defined ourselves as a species. We're not the fastest, we're not the strongest, we don't have the biggest claws, but we're the smartest species on this planet. And we're about to make something in the years ahead that's smarter than us. We're also about to change the nature of what it means to be us. And these two technologies play together. AI is a key part of synthetic biology. And then you throw quantum computing in there. Quantum computing in the last year has shown not only amazing technological advancement, we started to see some actual real kinds of problems in which it can blow away classical computers on. Now, I don't mean it solved an enterprise problem in a way that blows away the biggest supercomputers in the world yet. But some at least physical problems, some non-toy problems have shown the promise of even the small quantum computers that we have today. If they continue making the exponential progress they're making, it's not very many years before they're able to tackle some really interesting science problems and business problems and national security problems. One of those relates to synthetic biology, giving us a true understanding of the nature of matter, which we don't currently have right now because we don't have a great ability to model quantum chemistry. And when Richard Feynman posed quantum computers, he didn't do it for breaking codes. He didn't do it for AI or any of these problems. He did it to truly understand the nature of matter, and synthetic biology is involved. It will depend on quantum computing in that regard. Likewise, quantum computing is probabilistic in nature, but these AI methods we're using are. It's going to be a tremendous accelerator to AI as well, and then AI is an accelerator to synthetic biology. So my point here is, over the next several years, we've got this coming wave of technologies that we're going to need government guardrails for. It's going to drive massive amounts of innovation, but we also need to figure out what the guardrails are to make sure we don't go off the rails on this. So it's a wonderful time to be alive and see these things. And the world is going to look drastically different in 10 and 20 years than it does right now. And I hope everybody is part of the innovation that is about to come. But it's something that things like the Austin Forum are going to encourage you to pay close attention to and make sure all aspects are being looked at, not just what the next new capability is. And that was my third technology to discuss. I hope that was interesting to all of you, as it was to me to think about it in preparing for this. We're going to go into Q&A in just a bit, but we're going to have a little bit of that among ourselves as panelists first before we start taking audience questions. And I wanted to throw out a question to each of you. Actually, I have two questions for you. One is, what technology did you leave off the list here when I gave you the maximum count of 3, 2 for big changes in 2024 and 1 for beyond? What was the one that you hated leaving off, but you had to leave off?
I don't know if I hated it, but I do think that robotics, we talked a lot about whether or not we could be able to really, like, robotics are going to have a greater and greater impact on our lives. I think that's one I'm always curious about.
Literally what I was going to say too. So I just, we've actually we've seen a lot of advancement in robotics in the last year, and it's almost been overshadowed by a lot of the advances kind of in disembodied AI. But I think that's going to be a trend really over the next year. As we talk about, more, I talked a lot about like more increased personification of AI, but I think also like embodiment is just another part of that. And so robotics is what I was going to say as well.
Walsh, if you guys want to do any research, it's done a lot of research on that. It's really fascinating.
For me, it was also robotics. So clearly we're going to cover that in the Austin Forum here soon. But my second one, since you all said that, was battery technology. It doesn't sound so exciting, but battery technology is so important for electrification and clean energy and climate reasons. And yet the production of batteries is not very clean. But there are some new battery technologies that are cobalt-free, sodium-based, et cetera, that seem to be promising and to have a much lower environmental impact. And so I'm excited about that. All right, let me ask a question about Gen AI, since that came up a couple of times, actually several. There's lots of things going on that people are concerned about. What did you not get to, or did none of us get to, in the area of Gen AI that you think we need to address? Not what its capabilities are, but that need to be addressed in 2024 or real soon before we go off of some rails.
I'm just going to jump on mine because it's connected to climate tech, right? I don't think that we also have really paid attention to the energy use around this. So all of a sudden, my daughter's using ChatGPT to write a thank you note to someone, or to like basic things that you wouldn't necessarily go to a computer for. And every time we do that, we're using more energy. So how do we do that in more responsible ways? And I actually worked with a data storage company, and one of the questions was like, how do we pass on the cost for like cleaner storage centers. And I was like, you know what? I don't know that we could just pass on the cost. I think if you're going to make the data center, make it more sustainable. You know what I mean? It's just part of the cost of doing business at this point, is that we hold anybody who's writing code to make it more efficient, to making data centers more efficient, and to think about how we're using generative AI.
One I'll throw out is I think the tech there's a dimension in which this technology is actually really fragile, and the way we're going to increasingly become more dependent on it. And one thing that I think, you know, a lot of people don't. I was actually really surprised when I learned this over the last year, that 100% of the GPUs, the processors that power all of this generative AI, are produced in a single facility in Taiwan, which is not the most politically stable place for the one place that we're 100% dependent on this technology. If that facility goes offline, becomes unable to continue producing, all of this grinds, thank you, all this grinds to a halt. You know, obviously we have a bunch of the GPUs in existence now, but like the demand is outpacing. And, you know, companies like NVIDIA, they don't fabricate the chips, they design them. They design them, they send 100% of them go to this one facility in a very politically risky place. And, you know, we as we become more dependent on this tech, we need diversification of how we're actually able to continue doing it.
Yeah, and my answer to this one I already gave is, what if my tech trends? It's disinformation. I won't say terrified, but deeply, deeply concerned about it driving wedges between us. Events like this bring us together, and these wedges don't typically happen, even when people discuss different points of view in person, at the bar, over a beer, with their neighbor, etc. But online, where they can spread like wildfire to people that are anonymous to you, and you tend to not worry about the ramifications of maybe being a little emphatic in what you say in that. I'm very worried about that, and I hope that there appears to be no penalty for lying, even about dangerous things.
Can I just say that it's not just about that, it's about the business model that goes behind what's driving the internet. There's a great podcast by Ezra Klein for the New York Times talking about the $500 billion, whatever it is, economy that basically underpins the internet, which is advertising, right? And which is fueled by, you know, engagement, which, as you say, is fueled by rage. In a climate where people are very scared about transitions and scared about change. So it's really easy to be able to go and prey on that. So I think we all take responsibility, again, as advertisers who advertise on those platforms, as people who use those platforms, to really hold those platforms accountable. They can tweak some of those algorithms so that they actually are safer, and that they can check on some of that, and they choose not to, because it reduces then their advertising budgets, which reduces their stock price. So I think it's all a systemic, cyclical thing that we can take more responsibility for individually as well. The only thing that gives me some hope around that, Jay, is back in the day, Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson called each other out via anonymous pamphlet, right? And salaciously, like, talked about their sex lives and everything else in those pamphlets. And somehow we developed enough literacy to be able to work our way out of that. I think that as humans, we will figure out how to do that better. But I do think we also take responsibility for what it is that we each do, and how we play in the game.
I'm not sure that we're any better than we were then, and then we have bigger guns than that we did then, right? Yeah.
I'm not saying that
Pamphlets replaced by Facebook.
But they were also afraid of that when the printing press came out, that people were going to start printing, you know, books that who knew who wrote them. And somehow we figured out what authors we could trust and authors that we couldn't trust. I think over time we have developed capacities. It's so ramping up. You said exponentially at the beginning. And I think that's an important part. But I think, again, it's not that we always think it's out there and that someone's going to be able to regulate it or potentially watermark it with some sort of crypto thing, which is part of what we're hoping for.
Yep.
I think it's also that we think about the actual model that is fueling that. Right now, it's an economic model that doesn't serve us well.
And that, we're going, which is, you know, this is, you know, everything related to information security. It's an arms race. It always has been, and it will continue to be so. And, you know, it's going to be, you know, the disinformation will gain power and will leverage this technology and be able to wreak havoc. And we as a species will learn how to use these tools. This is where the prediction around blockchain, you know, like, we're going to get to a world where you cannot trust what you see. Like your fear is very real, Jay. Like, you know, there will be videos of people saying things that are indistinguishable in every way from if that person had actually said it, that will be completely manufactured artificially. That's undeniably
Moments away.
moments away. That's
We've had
undeniably
these
real.
tools for years. We just didn't have good tools that made it easy and fast to do and replicate.
That's
them,
right.
It
Well,
was
Yeah.
a lot of effort to do that in the past.
That's
Now
right.
it's easy.
Now it's
But
it's easy.
just to freak us all out. It's not just generative AI. We'll do it with bioscience, right? There's this whole conversation about the fact that we'll be able to create things in our garages and our kitchens, that we'll be able to, splice things and change things. Like there's a lot of these technologies. There's many of them that could go awry. I will end on an optimistic note when we think we're finished with this.
Go.
Brian, you
Go ahead, please. No.
You sure? So I did during the
Hold it to your mouth too.
Austin Forum a book review. I was able to do this book club at the end of December. And Kai-Fu Lee is an AI specialist. He is known for his work for many, many years. It's 10 stories about the future. They start from dystopian to utopian. But at the end, he says something that I think is really beautiful, and I think this is the most important part of this whole thing. He talks about these stories that have deep fakes, privacy infringements, autonomous weapons, job displacements, all the things we're worried about. These problems were not inflicted by AI, but by humans who use AI maliciously or carelessly. In the 10 stories collected here, these problems were overcome by human creativity, resourcefulness, tenacity, wisdom, courage, compassion, and love. In particular, our sense of justice, our capacity to learn, our audacity to dream, and our faith in human agency has always saved the day. We will not be passive spectators in the story of AI. We are the authors of it.
See, I didn't coach her on the questions I was going to ask, so clearly she was going to find a way to read that passage. All right. All right, and with that, we have time for probably 3 or 4 audience questions, especially if we are very concise in our answers. And we have Mary Garza, who's on the Austin Forum team and based in Houston. But she's the one that interacts with the online audience, and we wanted to give her this month to ask the questions in front of the in-person audience and the in-person presenters. So, Mary, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
All right, fire
so-
away, Mary.
All right. So the first question is from Earl Barg. Trend from 2023 was U.S. government oversight, though not much of substance resulted. Expectations for government oversight in 2024? And do you view this as a plus or minus?
Like you work on that more than I do. We've seen advances actually. Europe came out with the AI Act. China actually came out with some interesting regulation around generative AI in particular, obviously inside different size governments or different government structures. So I do think we've seen advances, and I think the U.S. has actually come up with something that we thought was useful.
Yeah, actually, I'm actually not super close to this, just because I think I'm drifting more into the world of I'm drifting more in the world of enterprises are going to actually increasingly, I think, move away from a lot of these problems and actually not really be as dependent on the foundation models like OpenAI's that are built on that are trained on open data, but they're rather going to be focusing more on building their own models where they actually control the training set so that they're actually free of a lot of these issues. So I think it's gonna be very interesting to see how kind of copyright and IP ownership issues play out. I actually don't have a good prediction on which way that goes. Actually, I'll make a prediction. I actually think it will probably we'll probably side more on the side of generative AI having a pretty loose interpretation of what is usable if it's been published on the internet, regardless of copyright. It kind of comes down to a little bit comes down to a philosophical question. I talked earlier about, like, do you believe that generative AI is kind of a thing that starts to become person-like? Are you infringing copyright if you've read 100 novels and you write a novel? Because certainly you are somehow imbuing the things you've learned by all that reading into the writing you produce. And so I think that's really the kind of the philosophical issue that's at the heart of a lot of these copyright questions. Is it feels like cheating if I have sent a machine to go read millions of documents and then produce new documents. Am I really producing anything net new? And the real question you have to ask is, well, are you any different? Would anyone alive be able to write a novel if they hadn't read novels? Would you be able to write a song if you hadn't listened to thousands of songs?
Yeah, this is a big debate that we have at our dinner table with my 2 boys. They have very different points of view on this. But I will say that I think that the New York Times is suing OpenAI and Microsoft because they feel like their stuff was just scraped and basically served back to me without a subscription. It's a really fair question.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's not a simple question for sure, but
Yeah, I don't have a prediction on how that's going to pan out either. I understand both sides of the argument. I tend to be of Brian's side, which is that we all consume things and then we produce things, but it's a much more explicit transaction. So I suspect there's going to be some compromise here, and I don't know what it will be. And but I agree with Brian also in the sense that a lot of companies are going to try to avoid the problem and avoid the hallucinations by trading on known correct data instead of an internet of a lot of correct data. And then a lot of things that lead you astray as well.
And we spent the weekend, because I was inspired by Brian's walking with his GPT, setting up our own GPT, right? For my book, we're going to do one for the Femme Futurist Society. We're trying to do with another big data set. So it's actually not, I mean, we haven't nailed it yet, believe me. But it's really interesting to think that you can create your own corpus of information that you want to mine.
All right, Mary, next question. Mary, did we lose you?
No,
There you go. Oh, the sound issues. We're having sound issues. Mary, you still there?
let's see.
Not nearly as
now?
good as we could.
Am I good?
Let's start tech predictions though, because we can't get some of these other little things.
tech
I predicted this would
Zoom
mess
will
up.
still be a problem.
What about now?
Yes.
Okay. If knowledge maps are to be a 2024 trend, how will we determine what is factual when it appears that we can't all agree on facts as a society? Does this mean that we will also have to deal with bias in the maps?
Great question. I think, and this is something I mentioned knowledge graphs and kind of how you and how you leverage these in conjunction with large language models is something we deal with a lot of times when there's nothing magically makes all of those facts accurate, right? You still have to have some kind of independent arbitration of what you choose to believe and what you don't believe. What incorporating more kind of explicit knowledge representation in AI solutions does is it makes it checkable, it makes it explainable. So when you ask an LLM a question, if you ask an LLM, who was the 44th president of the United States? It's going to come back with an answer. It's probably going to give you the right answer because that LLM was trained on the internet and there's millions of documents that tell you that correct answer. But there's no way to check, well, how did you do that? What was your source? It does not know. It's a statistical model that's read a bunch of documents and gives answers. What you do when you kind of integrate better with knowledge graphs is you basically say, show me the fact, show me the piece of information to which you're referring. The large language model is still incredibly powerful because it has a semantic index of all that information. So it understands how to take your fuzzy natural language human question and go point at the answer to the question is this, and here's where it's written down, and here's where you can go check it, and here's where you can go see that a human or some other entity actually verified this. So it's not about always getting the right answer. It's about getting an answer that actually can be checked and verified.
I want the Snopes for generative AI, right?
I'm going to add that there are things that are clear facts that are provable. There are also things that, while not provable, are the leading consensus by the vast majority of an expert community. Science works this way on a peer review basis. And one of the things that I lament is the lack of trust. It goes with this misinformation and disinformation that people have an expertise. I am not a virologist. I am not an epidemiologist. I'm not a biologist. So if 99% of the people that have spent their careers have a consensus on the effectiveness of something, I'm going to default to that. It's still okay for me to question it. It's still all science is when it's proven wrong, it gets better for being proven wrong. But we have to figure out how to start coding knowledge that is known fact is provable as such, and also how to code it in a way that it's expert consensus. It's still the potential for being wrong is there, but it's not 50-50 like that climate change survey humankind calls climate change from about 4 or 5 years ago, where 97% of climate scientists said yes, 50% of the US public said yes. It become a partisan issue when it's not. It's a science issue. And so we need to get to a point in these knowledge graphs
Yeah.
where we can code what is our degree of verification of that. Is it a provable fact? Is it a consensus expert fact? Or is it a consensus public opinion?
And it's also, sorry, I didn't even catch it. I was, it's 100% agree. And like part of it is like measuring, you know, what is the degree of veracity? How has this been verified? Who says this? What's the consensus on this? But it's also contextual in the sense of, you know, what am I using this information for? If I want to go learn about biology, I'm very much not a biologist. So going and asking ChatGPT, explain this to me, that's fantastic. I am going to learn a lot, and I'm going to get a lot of knowledge that's very useful to me to to learn this. If I'm going to go make a life or death decision, or I'm a, you know, again, I work a lot in the corporate world. So if I'm going to go ask a question of my data that I have to report to the SEC, where it's a crime if I don't report it correctly, I have to be able to check that fact. I would not trust a person to just give me that answer and say, well, this is what I'm reporting to the SEC because Bob said so. I have to, you have to be able to audit those facts. It comes down to a policy question on top of the data. It's how do you know what do you know about the truth of this information, and what's an appropriate level of explainability, of auditability for this question that I'm trying to answer.
Well, and I think that we haven't even cracked financial literacy yet, but I think digital literacy needs to be something that is taught from very, very early ages, and digital hygiene around all that, and understanding what it is that we're doing with this and how we can make those discernments. And last year I mentioned it, but I'll say it again, Warm Data Labs from Norman Bateson talked about a lot of the contextual portion of data, because we also think that everything is part of the reason that we have controversies is because we think everything is just completely binary, black or white, and the reality is that there are nuances. And I think as we learn more and can appreciate that more, we'll become more discerning in what we believe.
Great. We are going to try to take two more, and they're going to be lightning round questions. So each of us on stage cannot spend more than 20 seconds on these answers.
A lot of words.
So Mary, next to last question.
Okay. If and when autonomous agents become their own legal businesses through combination with blockchain, how will the legal landscape respond?
Way to pick a question that we cannot possibly answer in 20 seconds.
I'm only Brian. I'm not going to even try on that one.
You know, just to keep it very, very quick, like I think, you know, at the end of the day, corporations are basically an organization of rules, a set of contracts, and then people make decisions within that framework. What's going to change is that they're going to have not just people making decisions within that framework, but autonomous agents. I don't think it fundamentally changes the legal structure. I think, honestly, you know, the legal field is one that's actually getting a whole lot of change very quickly from AI already, because the notion of being able to take legal language and turn it into executable concepts that actually have kind of a logical framework is something that's you know, just so ripe for this.
Were DAOs part of the like early versions of this when people were setting up distributed autonomous organizations?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Sort of
I'm going to throw in one wrinkle, not an answer, just a wrinkle. Brian, I agree with you, except for the fact that our legal system is based also around who you can blame for it. And when there's no human involved in it, the legal infrastructure for it may have to be changed to try to figure out how to assign blame for
I mean,
it.
for the foreseeable future, there's always like a human at the end of the chain, right? Like there's some, at some point there is still some, you know, but we don't have a legal framework that affords direct legal personhood to an autonomous agent. Will we eventually? Yes, I think so. But yeah.
All right, now for the South by Southwest badge winning question. Mary, who is the person who asked the question? And we'll see if they're in the room.
Is Matthew Darcy in the room?
Matthew Darcy in here? Oh, yes, he is. All right. Congratulations, Matthew.
All right. To what degree would you say the receiving individual is for cultivating and exercising
Mary,
their
you're gonna have
own
to start
media
over 'cause we were still
literacy?
applauding.
Oh.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, are we ready?
Yes.
To what degree would you say the receiving individual is for cultivating and exercising their own media literacy in this new age of increased disinformation? And how can we as a society best help create an environment to cultivate media literacy for the 21st century?
That was a great question. What can you say in 20, 30 seconds, Brian?
Well, in 20, 30 seconds, I'm going to kind of come back. I mean, we've answered different shades of this. I think, you know, the conversation Nancy started earlier. I think, you know, this is it's going to continue to be an arms race. The people who want to spread disinformation and deceive you are going to leverage this technology. We are going to leverage this technology to combat that. We're going to continue developing new tools to use things like generative AI, to use things like blockchain, to use things that we haven't thought of yet, because it's going to be kind of the 2 or 3 generations out of that back and forth arms race. But you know, I think we will always be able to you know, we will always be able to kind of develop new tools. I think the challenge is, this is an answer, it's more like an extension of the question. The challenge is going to be, how do we distribute the knowledge about how to use those tools in any way that's sort of equitable? Because it's going to be the biggest challenge we're going to face is the folks kind of who are most aware, the folks who are sitting in this room and come to an event like this and are kind of very aware, are going to be able to more easily take advantage of those tools as they're developed, and getting them to where everyone can actually use them is going to be a big challenge, which is what propagandists take advantage of, the fact that there's going to always be a huge segment of the population who's way behind on that. And that was way more than 20 seconds, sorry.
Yeah, I'll just say again, just taking personal responsibility, understanding how the system works, and really thinking about, there's some that are really, really bad agents. There are people who just do it sometimes just out of ignorance or bias, and really checking that and getting much smarter and more humble about these technologies, and realizing that, you know, I don't think that we're the smartest people on the planet. Actually, humans aren't. We're good with tools, but if you look at viruses and you look at a lot of things in nature, they're actually smarter, I think, than we are. So having a little humility with this and getting a little more thoughtful with it would help.
I could totally argue that point, but I'm going to stick to that question, which is, yeah, it's going to require an evolving set of discipline on our parts of knowing where we're getting information from, knowing what tools are being developed to combat misinformation and disinformation, and continuing to evaluate the sources that you go to for using sources that can prove, perhaps with blockchain or other technologies, the source they got the information from, and that the information hasn't been changed between sending it to you and your reception of it. So there are technology tools and solutions potentially for these kinds of things, but just as right now you have to be aware of the source, you're going to have to always be aware of the source. And are they adopting those tools that are hopefully staying ahead of the people trying to use them for the wrong purposes? And with that, I want to thank our panelists. Thank you very much, guys, for being part of this conversation.